on a series of online events which take place under the DLT4ALL project, which is an Erasmus Plus funded project, and we'll be focusing on various aspects of blockchain, from technical matters such as smart contracts as today, and peer-to-peer databases to more practical aspects such as dApps, digital identities, and DAOs. Before giving the floor to Mr. George Vagenas, I will kindly ask you to fill out a brief questionnaire, which is an online questionnaire. I will be sharing the link in the chat box because your opinion is very valuable to us. So that's it from my side. George, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Okay, greetings everybody. My name is George Vagenas. I'm part of the Gnomon team in the DLT4ALL project. I'm working as a blockchain designer and project manager of the blockchain smart contract blockchain system. And my main field of experience is environmental biology and data flow and analytics. Today, we are going in this specific part of this blockchain event. We're going to have an overall discussion about smart contracts in business from a market standpoint. In the yesterday's lectures, and I'm referring to the core lessons that my colleague Dimitris Sfounis made an approach in the smart contracts, he set the major disciplines. Now we're going to have a realistic approach in the today's utilization of smart contracts in business. This lecture is about to estimate around 30 minutes, and then we can all have a discussion, Q&A session, then the round table, of course. And it would be great if you manage to keep your questions for the end of the presentation, so we can have plenty of time to proceed in a productive interaction. Very briefly, this course aims to discuss, we're going to discuss about the relational utility and the major use case of smart contracts in the business arena during the last decade. By meaning the last decade, of course, we mean that smart contracts may exist as a theoretical concept since 1994 from Nick Szabo, but tend to a real-life tool since the Ethereum, and by saying Ethereum we mean the creator, Buterin Vitalik, that utilize them. Then we're going to present the workflow of an enterprise smart contract application in detail, which we think that is the most important asset of this presentation, because it will give us the ability to realize the approach that should take place when we want to work or handle smart contract operations and ideas. At the end, we're going to present, I'm going to present the main challenges that an investor should be aware in a sense of the technological dangers that may occur during the design of a smart contract project. Challenges and traps that will be mentioned to give you an idea about what you have to be aware of. Now, let's start. How smart contracts elevate the international business landscape. Since the mid-50s, an exponential development of IT industry took place at a global gradual scale. The creation and the utilization of internet as we know it nowadays was the main determinant which expanded this already successful tool of modern humanity. In numbers, a report of the International Data Corporation showed that global IT industry is expected to have a 5.2 trillion USD net worth during 2020. Of course, these estimations were prior to the Corona period. In a regional level, Mediterranean countries act as a key player in this market by gathering, as you can see in the graph, almost a quarter out of this huge amount. The real value obtained through the IT industry is even bigger if we consider the academic and research impact that EU countries have on the global development process. A new tool that has been given the last decade is blockchain technology. And I think that its most famous asset, smart contracts, came to reshape conventional industry and business operations as we knew them. So how smart contracts will elevate the business landscape? As Dimitris said yesterday, and of course Iraklis complete the whole aspect of what and use cases like privacy or security, smart contracts as a bunch of code lines emptied onto the blockchain can have the ability to enable agreements via contractual terms to be executed automatically without the intervention of a third party, broker or banker. Afterwards, every transaction is permanently stored onto the blockchain. This can lead to where? It can lead to a peer-to-peer globalized market. Individuals in a network where they can create dynamic and secure at the same time interactions, in our case, transactions, in order to optimize the current status of business. We see that now we're going to see specifically how. There have been two notable review works that took place from Wang and others, and Zheng and others, the last 2 years, that revealed all the additional benefits of smart contracts in an operational manner. And finally, there are 3 main axes that support the structure of smart contract technology with benefits. First, we have the reduction of risk, where permanent storage can assure that sensitive data are immutable and thus are secured. The transparency of the data means that anyone with the right information, transaction hash or the access address of the wallet, can access the transaction list under the frame of pseudonymity, and thus it can support data protection while at the same time information belongs to a decentralized network and not in someone's central server. Traceability of transactions and thus traceability of each expressed product through this permanent record of transaction can occur. Of course, we have readability, which is the ability of an accounts inspection inside a business or a governmental state, or even in between them. That means that there is no need of trust. So we have the reduction of risk, but also we have the reduction of costs. In the papers, it has been proved that with the use of smart contracts, there's a significant reduction of the transaction costs, and we, at the same time, we can have rapid enforcement of costs. For example, if we're talking about a governmental administration office, we can have a rapid enforcement of penalties, for example. And with this tool set, we see and we can understand that we can achieve a reduction of the administration fees through this whole automatical procedure. With the previous two, we realized that we can gain additional efficiency. We can have reduction in time and in time delays of all the different procedures that we want to work with. We can have an increase of the operational flow. We have the ability to proceed in advanced macro data analysis because we can gather different information very cheap, very fast. We can gather all this data and we can eventually succeed an integration inside a wide network of collaborators and partners with a variety of cross functionalities under this framework of data administration. In the next slides, we will see the actual business utilization of the aforementioned advantages. In order to be specific, we have to identify the major smart contract use cases in applied operations. I'm going to use some results of the work by Salmeron Manzano and Manzano Gugliaro that has been published last year, where they ran specific analysis in the large database of Scopus. As we can see in the figure, they found that computer science, engineering, and mathematics had the majority of the use cases in the papers that have been found, something which can be described as obvious. By being a bunch of scripts, as we said before, the first and most related sectors will be computing, engineering, and mathematics. The next applied sector that can be identified is energy and business management and accounting. For example, the supply chain management that we will see in the next slides. Then natural sciences follow up, with medicine being one of the most well-known application use cases, which is actually highly related with the identity management concept that we will see in this specific field that I will set some comments. Then we have economics and finance as a major use in the research field. It is interesting though that finance, and by saying finance, we mean cryptocurrency market.
Processes and metrics defining those processes.
Excuse me?
It's all good. Continue, please.
Okay, okay.
It's yours.
By saying economics and finance, what do we mean? We mean, of course, right now as a use case, the cryptocurrency market. It is indeed the biggest market around blockchains, but the applications on finance and economics are actually behind the computation arena. This shows that we're still passing through the theoretical era, and we are heading towards the applied and operational age of blockchains. Last but not least, environmental, agricultural, and biological sciences, and of course, primary production in general, is an immature field for developers. And we, as a team, believe that there's a key for sustainable production and integration of smart contracts in real life solutions and in real life problems, of course. Let's start with the energy and smart contract metering. As Bernard Marr stated in his book, blockchain as Internet of Value was created itself to transfer value, any kind of value, anywhere in the world. This is probably the most important thing that I want you to remember from this lecture. And if I'll manage to make you feel and think that blockchain is more of an interconnected layer of value instead of just a bunch of platform for transactions. It's a layer that can host all different types of data and the transactions that can occur through the different players, stakeholders inside this network. How we're going to transfer values of products into assets in order to find the in-between space of innovation, though. Last year, Matthias Lang published a significant work about the connection of smart contracts with the energy sector. In conjunction with his findings and our current knowledge, energy as a physical asset can be expressed as a digital asset, and then it can stored, transferred, recirculated according to its design, of course. And by saying design, we mean the code behind. Furthermore, through a market standpoint, small-scale producers of energy, for example, non-renewable energy production, or even more, someone that just stores energy, can utilize smart contracts and blockchains in general as a distributional network, replacing that way the need for energy suppliers, the third-party intermediaries that we said before. An important use case of this topic was the Brooklyn microgrid project in the US, where with the use of smart meters into the electric grid and with simple but efficient Ethereum smart contracts, they succeed to create a peer-to-peer market of energy, faster, cheaper, transparent transactions, of course, and into a secured environment. In simple words, if Alice has some spare batteries, as an individual peer player, just asks Bob if he needs some energy, and through this distributional network, she can transfer this specific amount. As we can see, Alice says, it was a sunny day. I produced some extra energy. Does anyone need any? And Bob just says, sure. And 12 seconds later, through this distributional network, we have it. Another concept is natural resources, which is an expression of energy too, just like water itself. And very briefly, less than 2 years ago, my team started to develop a smart contract platform aimed for the water management in China, in the Yangtze region, which is one of the most productive regions in the world. And the annual revenue of the region is estimated to be around $4 trillion US. We approached the design through an interdisciplinary manner where blockchain and aquatic science was combined. We used biome technology because we had the ability to digitize heterogeneous real-world resources. We had some milestones, we had some collaborations, we had some awards, but the most important thing through this trip that I think that I should share with you is that energy and natural resources, the selection of these objectives was an important determinant that gave us a comparative advantage in contrast with similar projects that had other regular, let's say, use cases, common use cases. We'll see the main design of a similar idea and its implementation in the talk problem that we will work in the following slides. Now let's pass to an original business-oriented sector, the field of supply chain management, and its abbreviation CSM. CSM can be defined as the exploration of different utilities that can and will optimize cross-company business processes that are characterized by 1, downstream flows of goods and services. For example, the delivery of a smartphone from the manufacturer factory to a supplier and then to a potential client. And of course, the second thing, the upstream flows of information and finances. An example here, it can be the cost of the whole operation in the form of a ledger so that the smartphone can be delivered. We realize that supply chain hides the word chain, and we do have similar form in the structure of blockchains, so the connection may be apparent. But why smart contracts can be useful in this field? Blockchain, as a distributed database, can be described as a list of cryptographically connected transaction blocks. Smart contracts, on the other hand, as we've said, are encoded contractual agreements which are activated when a type of transaction occurs. The connection between them into the supply chain management is that smart contracts are simple scripts that allow mutual parties to do business in a deterministic way. Whenever a specific transaction takes place, another transaction will also happen. In other words, we can achieve a chain of reaction of useful data through this smart contract algorithmic holder. And thus we can achieve automated, as we've said, secured, fast, inexpensive mutual agreements by removing one of the most important uses, of course, and advantages. We can remove the human error and bias. Now we can talk with numbers. There are two very well-known examples. We will see that Walmart, during a pilot implementation, stated that blockchain applications help the company to reduce the time needed to track the movement of products shipment from 7 days, and you can see the huge amount of seconds, to just 2.2 seconds. We realize the money that has been saved. Another example is that in 2017, Maersk and IBM launched the TrendLens smart contract platform, which represent a cross-border blockchain solution. And in order to optimize workflow operations, the delays and human error removal, as I've said before, by achieving 40% efficiency in a market estimated around $1.2 trillion. Therefore, saving time and, as we said, billions of US dollars. Now let's go to the hot thing, which is financial use cases. By saying that, we can set it to the international asset transfers, the most common worldwide use of blockchain and smart contracts in general. It's a typical phenomenon, of course, that we face in our daily life. Each time we want to explain to someone that what blockchains are, and of course, at least me, I start with, are you familiar with the blockchain technology? And when the answer is no, I proceed to the question, are you familiar with Bitcoin? And so the answer is yes. And then we have a common base to continue. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Neo, EOS, Monero, thousands of cryptos comprise a market which we call cryptocurrency market. It was less than a decade ago when smart contracts revolutionized the global norm with their fundamental encoded features: immutability, transparency, privacy, security. To date, according to tradingview.com, there's a daily circulation of 180 billion US dollars, while the total market capitalization is almost 300 billion US dollars. Since the peaks of early 2018, where one Bitcoin was estimated around $19,000, we're facing the bear market, a period, of course, of prolonged price declines. Aligned with the crypto market, financial services like banking appear to be very important in the business arena. And why is that? By switching to smart contracts, banks and financial institutions can experience automated, accurate operations, and they can process and guarantee conformity to strict regulations and requirements. Just a very brief quote of Alexander Zelinsky, the CEO of Velvet Banking, a blockchain-based banking system. He said that by removing the people factor, the human error, we are in place to set full trust in the automated secure smart contracts, which is a secure environment for investors to exchange and invest different assets of value. Another important utility of smart contracts is the identity management. And we find great implementation of this asset in the healthcare industry. Similarly to the supply chain management, Smart contracts have the ability to streamline insurance claims and increase public access to cross-institutional data. Since information on the blockchain cannot be manipulated, because that's why it's immutable and permanent transactions, and counting and storing personal health records can ensure additional privacy and confidentiality, of course. This can allow consumers to easily use and transfer their patient information if needed. On the health provider side, this decentralized ledger system can be utilized to manage drug and care supplies, as well as test results, very sensitive data. Smart contracts, of course, can fix poorly managed patient data, but how? In the work of Kriegs and others 2 years ago, as you can see in the relevant figure, it was demonstrated that Ethereum smart contracts can automatically keep clinical anonymous data in a permanent ledger in order to utilize big data with more streamlined information, leading, of course, to more significant results. Sensors that were connected to an Oracle master device, which transmits the data to a network of nodes and then into the blockchain. Afterwards, smart contracts, the account holders, as we say them, send the data, store the data, and then control the type, quantity, and the quality of information that is going to be transferred to additional identities, let's say doctors, medics, governmental state organizations, etc. Finally, the question remains though, of all those sectors and axes, where the market is headed. Once more, scientific analysis related to real-life use cases showed that during the last decade, applications regarding smart contracts appear to form two distinct clusters. The first is the market cluster, which gathers all the issues around security, privacy, etc. And of course, the other cluster is the applied one, where smart power, where smart power grids and distribution systems, natural resources management coexist. Once more, we believe that this second cluster regarding applications will bring additional revenues and will expand even more the theoretical background with new ideas, cases, concerns, and challenging concepts. In a macro-scale entrepreneurial level, it seems that a new era will rise with the potential prevalence of smart contracts. Smart contract applications can go, of course, beyond the optimization of enterprise workflow. They can facilitate the integration of small, medium enterprises into cross-organizational work groups by creating open access peer-to-peer environments in order to establish fair participation. With simple words, we have two different groups in a common battlefield. The first group, the big players, big, strong, already expanded and established companies, which are characterized by enclosed and centralized systems of information and services leading to conventional innovation. And the second group, the small medium enterprises, which strive to develop as individuals. Smart contracts can give the ability to small medium enterprises to create a peer-to-peer network of mutual trustless collaboration in a distributed and decentralized manner, getting that way rapid innovation along with risk and cost reduction, and of course, improved efficiency. Where smart contracts can create maximum value. This is a very important figure that we have to remind ourselves in the beginning of every entrepreneurial activity related with smart contracts. A successful project is one that gathers all the different advantages of smart contracts in an harmonic layer which is better than traditional already existing applications. First, smart contracts utilize decentralization as their main element. No need for trust already exist in the form of transparent data. It seems that the most applications, and the number is 44%, as you can see, you can use the resources that we have in the end of the presentation. The most applications choose smart contract platforms primarily for this specific advantage, for the transparency of the data. In addition, with transparency, anonymity exists, so we can preserve privacy in order to upgrade market competitiveness or the security of our partner and customers' agenda. Immutability provides, of course, our ledger with permanent data as an asset of security. Last, rapid enforcement occurs through the automation of transactions of data, a utility that improves trust between potential collaborators. There's no need for payment or the delivery delay, and thus we can prevent legal issues between companies. All the above elements lead to reduction of complexity into business arena, combined with a reduction in the overall operational cost. In the next slide, we're going to see how we can approach an idea with the above assets in an effective way. According to Food Agriculture Organization 2016 data regarding the Black Sea and the Mediterranean region, these regions had the production of regarding marine exploitation, production revenue around 27 million US dollars. In the eastern side, Italy holds almost a half, while Egypt, Turkey, and Greece are notable players in the market, in this market too. As we've seen before, clusters of innovation in the field of smart contracts are constantly driven from theory to application. Today, the baseline is already there. Innovative approaches, for example, primary production, can bring the change that the market needs. Through the approach of smart contracts and blockchains in general, we can identify all the freelancers as peers in a same network where they don't need the presence of an intermediary to spread and to allocate their production. Our research and development team had already worked on a prototype called MaxiBlue. The main idea behind MaxiBlue, and we're going to see the design in the next slide, is to host and at the same time optimize this blue production of the Mediterranean in order, of course, to maximize it. A very wise question, of course, would be, why should I use smart contracts instead of another common used interactive database? The design of a smart contract requires a holistic approach. Smart contracts can be abstracted to an holistic design. What do we mean by that? Simply that every disadvantage that currently exists in the supply chain of operations can be approached and operated by an automated contractual agreement. And specific in the use of MaxiBlue and the primary production of the Mediterranean, there is a large problem with absence and obscurity of data. With the implementation of a homogeneous smart contract operated platform, transparency can occur, and thus the solution regarding the lack of systematic data in marine products and biomass exists. Additionally, another problem is the need for a ledger. Blockchain as a continuous structure of data provides an immutable ledger. In a transnational approach, this ledger can be utilized towards sustainable development. For example, under the for the use, European Union can use it in order to get significant results and set new funding tools for each country so that we can have sustainable development and policy enforcement, reducing that way frauds with reporting and bad behaviors in the system. The data may be permanent, but the players remain anonymous for each other, so the need for trust does not exist, which is a vital functionality that is needed in competitive markets. Last but not least, traceability can be provided through the persistent record keeping in the blockchain with the use of GPS, of course, and the timestamp that exists in each transaction, solving that way issues regarding the identification and authenticity of each product type. Blockchain provides us with tools that are adapted to real-life problems that seek solutions. But we need to remember that we don't have to find solutions for non-existent problems, which is a common sin in entrepreneurial behavior, especially in the field of novel technologies, such as smart contracts. Now I'm going to give you a brief explanation of the main idea behind this design, the number of smart contracts and the assets that are being used, and how the system can step-by-step reach a circular decentralized economy. As you can see, we have 6 types of wallets in a similar form, like our initial, like the project that I showed you before, the blockchain project regarding the water management in China. We have the wallets of the control sector, where you can see the government in the top, and the research organizations that they gather the data and they control, they administrate the whole procedure, their wallets. And of course, we have the production sector, where we have the environmental zones and the fishing vessels that represent a realistic market approach. Then we have the market, we have middle salesmen and consumers that, and this where our chain ends up. And we have all the type of information exist at the same time in all the wallets, permanently, anonymously, immutably, and of course, with low cost, along with the asset of traceability. Now, I think I'm going to skip because we're running out of time. This is about regarding the human resource challenge that you have to face during a smart contract design. But I think this is more important, the importance of networking in the novel market of smart contracts. In order to succeed in an immature market, suitable networking steps should be taken. At least this is the design, this is the steps that we followed to set our project. We started and we've set entrepreneurial allies. We've set regional collaborations with high quality companies that match the goals of our implementation or your implementation in that case, and share the same vision of yours. And now we have something that's very important, that widely used smart contract platforms will advance this step. And you see the source that we saw that 50% of the applications until 2018 were running under Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric platforms. Then it's very important that you should follow worldwide conferences and exhibitions and participation in exhibitions every month, at least prior to the Corona period. Every month, numerous companies and organizations gather to discuss about the current trends and to promote innovative prototypes. Only for 2020, 72 blockchain events have been organized, but I don't think that much have been already. I think they do not exist anymore as events. Then research organizations and academia will help a lot, because due date, it's a solid fact that smart contract applications used in business have been published papers, and as you can see, the number is 81%. And at the end, it's very important to have national and EU, in our case, public collaborations, which is a major step to establish successful integration of your project as a key player in the field of blockchain technologies. And I think this is the last page. I'm going to set very briefly, if I have the time, the major challenges in the smart contract arena. We have the creation challenges from the code, from the set and the writing of the code to the deployment of the smart contract. It's a very important step, because since blockchains, as we said, are immutable and cannot be modified after the deployment. So this is the first step that you should be aware of, at least your IT team. Then we have the deployment challenges, and we mean by that we mean from the deployment to the stored onto the blockchain. Then we have the execution challenges, which is a very crucial phase, which determines the efficiency of all the uses that you have already decided your smart contract. And the completion challenges, the last thing, because it's connected with privacy and security issues. And just to show you, let's say just one thing for the type of scams that can occur. We have the phishing scams. Of course, most of you already know phishing scams. They are the most common type of scams, at least on Ethereum platform. In simple words, the victim receives an email or just a random message that tricks them into sharing sensitive personal information. You already know that: identity information, the keys of the wallet, in order to log in to your Ethereum wallet. We have Ponzi scams. Ponzi schemes, it's also a very common scam, also in the Ethereum platform. They actually, what they do, they promise the investors very high returns in exchange for an initial investment. And of course, we have the ICO exit scams, scam companies that raise capitals via unregulated ICOs, initial coin offerings. And once the ICO revenue is completed, they disappear, they exit, and there's a huge loss. And just so that you can see a wide picture of what's going on, in 2019, scams comprised the most of cryptocurrency-related crime, estimated at $8.2 billion. In fact, Ponzi scams would only account for 0.46% of all cryptocurrency activity. If there wasn't the Ponzi schemes, we would have just less than 1%. So we see how huge are the Ponzi scams. Last noteworthy fact is that blackmail scams increased 4 times since the last report of 2018 to $22.5 million, which can be a large deterring factor that can keep new investors from entering in the blockchain community. You can have all the references that we've used in our last slides, and of course the media attributions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, thank you, George, and thank you, Nikos, for the question you posed. Please be patient to discuss it after.
Great. We have a question. I'd be glad to answer. So, Dimitris, should I stop sharing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the questions will be answered in the roundtable discussion, I think.
Yes.
Dimitris, right?
Yes. Thank you, Nico, for the question, and you are very welcome to join our discussion at the last phase of this workshop. I will now give the floor to Irakli to tell us.
Okay, give me a second to share my screen, and I will be with you.
Irakli is going to talk about the practical aspects and practical examples of the relationship between IPR and privacy and blockchain. We talked about this yesterday on a more foundational level, and today we're going to have a brief presentation about the practical and hands-on cases.
So in theory now you should see my screen. Yes, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Iraklis, great.
Very clear.
All right, thank you. So very quickly, what I will go on to from yesterday's presentation, and today we'll try and provide you with some hands-on cases. And there are two topics that I would like to stress and use as examples. The first of all is rather controversial because it requires a rethinking of how data is handled within the era of GDPR and data protection in general, and it has a rather radically different perspective as to how data ought to be governed. And the other thing is where I will show you 3 use cases where blockchain is actually has actually been implemented in products, and these are the Indian Land Registry, the Swedish Land Registry as well, and the Sony digital rights management use case. So very quickly, the first one, the title is Managing Personal Data in the Digital Economy 4.0. This is a concoction of mine based on the Industry 4.0, as you may know, term, which is talking about the new industrial revolution where data is a driver. So I'm talking about digital economy 4.0 because digital economy is a term that we have seen in the past as well, especially with the rise of e-commerce all the way back in the early in the 90s and early 2000s. But where again the data is the fuel here, and it's about how we could potentially monetize data in a way that it provides some returns back to the people who actually generate the data. So let me explain to you in detail. So as you know, GDPR is having a number of problems, is posing a number of problems, is imposing a number of problems. Some of them are the fact that you have the right to be to ask for erasure of data, and therefore if you have any kind of blockchain applications, that causes a problem, because one of the vital and very important features of blockchain is the ability not to change, not to mutate, not to alter the contents of that data. Therefore, now you ask them to actually not only just to not to change, but to completely delete and eradicate that data. So this is a problem primarily because at the moment the data is considered to be the ownership of the data controller. So as I said to you yesterday, for those that were here yesterday, when you walk down up and down the aisles of the supermarket, then the data that you're creating by shopping, etc., and all your behavior within the supermarket aisles is the property of the supermarket. Whereas I'm proposing that actually, since you are generating the data, you become the owner of the data and not the supermarket. So in that case, you actually do want the blockchain applications, and you do want the properties, because you want to know then how your data is going to be utilized by the very people who are currently known as data controllers, the supermarkets themselves, and everybody else who might be interested in that data that you have generated through your shopping behavior and your behavior walking down and up and down the aisles of the supermarket and stopping there and passing very quickly some other aisles and so forth. So all that very interesting data, which means something to the people, to the suppliers and to the supermarket itself, then you can sell it. And therefore you need a way where all this is handled automatically without the human intervention. And this is where applications like smart contracts that both George and Dimitris yesterday explained in some detail. Therefore, really, and in that way, you want to know exactly what is the process that they want to apply on that data, for how long they applied, who exactly is applying that data, that process, and so forth. Therefore, you want all this to happen, A, in a transparent way, and B, you want this to be in a way that is not disputed, is in an indisputable way. Okay, so therefore now we want all the properties of blockchain that were causing problems. And also at the same time, you solve the problem of deletion, because the data is yours, and therefore you can do whatever you like. If, for example, you stop in an area of the supermarket where you feel embarrassed for whatever reason, then you can delete that data. It's your data. Whereas, because that data represents somebody else, a data subject, the controller cannot delete it unless the subject asks them to delete it. Okay, so that resolves completely the problem as well. On top of that, by having this approach, then again, you fulfill some new requirement of GDPR, which is the portability of the data, because the GDPR recognizes the power of data, and therefore it does not want to, and also implicitly recognize that this data belongs to that data subject, and therefore they want the data subject to take advantage of their behavior, thus attract some offers, whatever, in the current situation from the various suppliers. Therefore, they can ask from supermarket A to transfer all that data into supermarket B and C and D and so forth. And this has to happen in a rather electronic format, in a way that it can be immediately utilized by the new data controller as it exists at the moment. Okay, so therefore, this can happen very easily. I mean, if the data is yours, all you have to do is merely grant them access and agree with them in a smart contract manner what are the processes that they want to run on it, for how long, and what is the price that you will get out of this data yourself. Also, when you ask access, so that is with the new way of utilizing data. If we come back to exactly what it is at the moment, as you know, one of your rights is to have access to the data. And as I explained to you yesterday, through blockchain applications, you have the ability now to make sure that your request is never lost, because if it happens on a centrally control system administered by the Data Protection Authority of the country where you are currently residing in within the European Union, then a timestamp has already been posted on your application, on your request for access, and therefore the DPO, the Data Protection Officer of that organization, is alerted, and therefore then they have a specific time limit within which they have to respond to you for your request. The same goes with breaches, an even more important aspect that now the General Data Protection Regulation is really enforcing, and there is a direct fine if they fail to act upon within specific time limits. And as I said to you yesterday, British Airways was fined over £180,000 in UK because their web pages were not as secure as they ought to be, and therefore data was lost to hackers, which contained vital private and financial information of all the individuals who had purchased tickets from the web page of British Airways. And they were quite late in responding and informing people that a breach had occurred. Therefore, they could take corrective actions like cancelling credit cards, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so such an application of such an application which is based on blockchain features could be of assistance to DPO to administer its role and perform it in a much better and a much more organized and transparent way, where both sides see exactly what is happening. So this is as far as privacy goes, and the opportunities that exist, and generally all you can develop a number of tools that observe a number of requirements, like for how long, what kind of processes. All this could be run through a blockchain application, which reassures the data subject, even if the data does not belong to them, that the data is actually performing as to what they had agreed when they consented for the data to be collected in the first instance. So it is something that I think that as we realize the importance of privacy in this data and age, where everything that we perform in the digital world, which is all more and more becoming a larger part of our daily life, and an integral part and a necessary part of our life, then we need to exercise, I think, in my opinion, we really need to exercise some type of control over it, and therefore a blockchain application can provide us some peace of mind that certain things are happening in the way that they are supposed to happen, and not rely on the trust of the individual who may or may not be able to come to really abide by their promise for a number of reasons. Okay, so now without much delay, I will pass on to use cases where real estate and properties, and particular land registries, is the cases where we have seen applications being developed. First of all, for different reasons. First of all, from India, we have the cases of fraud, where really the land registry is a problem that has been addressed by a number of countries. USA is thinking of it. Canada, they have really gave it some thought. Australia has already a few months back passed on. They have privatized the land registry, which is normally a service provided by the state, and they have privatized this because they found it extremely difficult and extremely costly, to keep and ensure the validity and the integrity of all the handheld records, but also the state does not want to undertake the cost of digitizing all this information and passing on to the system, and which will therefore potentially will save them from a situation where an earthquake, flood, fire, something occurs, and everything that is on paper-based format will just potentially disappear, and therefore nobody will know exactly what belongs to whom and so forth. Therefore, in India, what has happened is that in some states within India, people have falsely claimed that that a piece of land belonged to them. Of course, with the assistance of some officials, they were able to sell land to the people who were not aware that this was a forgery and fraud. Particularly, this happened to expats, i.e., people who were living abroad, but nevertheless they wanted to have some piece of land back in the village where they were born, and therefore they were emotionally attached. Thus, everything happened through a proxy, and therefore when they came back, they really didn't know to whom this land belonged to, and therefore they approached this in good faith, and they signed, and then eventually they found that they had paid money for a piece of land to somebody who didn't have the right to sell that land. Therefore, the state of Punjab, if I remember well, has seen a dramatic increase of such claims, where now everybody is going to the court trying to address their grievances. So the person who paid the money, they want their money back, but also the person whose land belongs to, they want their land back. But of course, the person who owns now the land says, I have a valid deed, and therefore the land is mine, and so it's a mess. So really, the state of Punjab is currently, I think a few months back, they are in talk with some Swedish company who is trying to implement a blockchain application, which will, of course, ensure not necessarily the accuracy, because every system, as you know, suffers from the very, very fundamental problem that if you put garbage in, you will get garbage out. Therefore, if you put false information in, then this false information will be perpetuated, yes? But at least it will ensure that there is always something that denotes an owner, and therefore this cannot change by merely the collaboration of some fraudulent people, but rather the system is much more prone to consistency and is able to repel such fraudulent activities. Okay, so the next thing is Sweden. Sweden has implemented this in their land registries with the aid of a company called Chromaway and Kairos Future, and through the telecommunication service provider Telia and the registry, and all these partners have come together to provide this solution because currently the current situation, Sweden has some very peculiar legislation when it comes to funding, i.e. the mortgage, where there have to be some protracted negotiations to ensure that this land belongs to the person who is actually selling it, and therefore this person has actually instructed the lawyers and the estate agents to actually negotiate on their behalf and be able to sell the land or the property. So this is really causing quite a huge number of wasted, inverted commas, days and months where all this whole situation is protracted for no good reason today, that is. And therefore, they anticipate that through this, they will have quite a fraction of the time that is currently needed for a contract to be completed if they use a blockchain system where only the trusted members are able to log in and enter and negotiate, and therefore the blockchain system will, in a way, guarantee the identity, as Yorgos showed you, of course, not in that sector, but in the health care sector, you know, through a smart contract managing the identity management, they will be able to identify themselves and verify that these are the guys who are supposed to be, and therefore they're able to enter into a contract with them. So this is the second case of land registry where we see that this is where blockchain is used in order to bring this service into the 20th century, or rather the 21st century that we're in at the moment, but also at the same time solve some problems, fraudulent cases in India, times of time consumed unnecessarily today because of some peculiarities as far as the law is concerned in Sweden. And now we move into a different area, which is to do with digital rights management. Again, I spoke to you yesterday, to those of you who were present yesterday, about ERTFlix, the new service offered by the Greek Broadcasting Corporation, ERT, where it simulates the Netflix operation. You can view over the net various programs. Whereas, what happens at the moment in ERT is that programs for which they have bought, they have paid in order to broadcast the particular program on TV, they only have a particular time frame for which they can actually show the program on TV, and then they can share it over ERTFlix. After that, that program is removed because the license agreement that they have reached with the copyright owner stipulates that you only have this window frame to use this program. If a blockchain application, a digital rights management application, was run by ERT, that meant that this particular program could stay on. You could see it for free during the period that is for which ERT has already paid for a license, an agreement, and beyond that, then you could be billed automatically on a need-to basis by the copyright owner, and therefore then you will buy a time frame which will be for you individually this allowed in order to be able to view this, and therefore that way the viewer of ERT will be happy because they may have missed the free period, but still the program is there, and therefore they're able to watch it. The copyright owner is happy because they make some extra income out of it, and ERT is happy because the customer, the viewer, is happy because they were able to see that they were able to facilitate the viewer to view it beyond the data they were able to provide for free. And also potentially they can make also a small cut of the money that were generated for the copyright owner. So Sony, which as you know has music, but also it has a film studio in America, for them it has been quite a pain to handle all this IPR, because not only you have worldwide sales, but also you have videos, etc., etc., and you have people who sell DVDs of your movies, etc., to individuals. So you need to control all that stuff, and therefore you need to be certain that something is happening when everybody claims that it happens, or something does not happen if people say that. For example, you may have sold to a particular sales office in Greece DVDs, the license to sell DVDs, and therefore you charge them, let's say, €4 per DVD. But suddenly, a particular movie, which is potentially a bit oldish, they find that they can sell it for 1,000 copies if they sell it for €1, and therefore they want Sony not to charge them the normal price, but rather to charge them a discounted price, because they also offer a discount price for the seller. Therefore, whereas today they have to go back and ask and really get an agreement through a blockchain application. They would find what is the window, what is the limit that Sony imposes upon the level of discount, and they can apply, and Sony can be reassured that this discount is not a scam, but rather it's a real thing that has actually taken place, because everything is transparent. Okay, so really this is quite a tool that currently Sony is implementing. It has not implemented yet, but they have put their money into it, and they are trying to address that. And I think this is it for me. Thank you very much. Also, here you will see some references where you can see more information about what I have just just told you. Also, you see two journals. One is talking about the role of blockchain in general regarding land registry, and I think also the next Andrian is going to talk to you about this as well, this particular topic. But also the last one is a case where it talks about India specifically, and talks about the problems and the expectations, because this is an academic paper. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions and discussion during the panel session. So Dimitri, the floor is yours. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now we will have the presentation by Andrian Thras, who was kind enough to join us today with very practical and market-oriented insights and knowledge. She is kindly here today to present us the perspective of the investment community towards blockchain businesses, startups, the adoption in general.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for having me, for the opportunity. My name is Adrian. Just a small warning here, if the doorbell rings, it's my son coming home, so I might have to stop for a second. So I just ask for forgiveness in advance here. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, but it might take me 1 second here. Hang on. I think. Hold on a second. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes, Adrian, thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna move the window out of the way here. Sorry about that, guys. Hang on. Okay. Sorry, here we go. So this is actually going to be a little bit of a repeat, hopefully not in exactly the same way as what Iraklis and George and have been talking about today. I think that I'm trying to take a slightly different take on it, as Dimitri just said. This is more of a look at things from the market and investment side in terms of how blockchain's been adopted, and especially smart contracts. So we'll take a quick look at things by the numbers. Basically, the industry is growing as it diversifies. Although, you know, sizing the market is always kind of a little bit of a voodoo game. You know, there are different ways to size markets, and many different market research firms come up with very, very different numbers. But overall, we can say that as a market size for blockchain technology globally, they're expecting it to reach almost $60 billion by 2025. And the revenues generated by those companies are going to be almost 40 billion in the same period. Blockchain as a service, and this is a very interesting statistics for me, was valued at almost 2 billion in 2019, but it's projected to reach almost 25 billion by 2027. So you can see that blockchain as a service is actually growing as a very, very fast sector of a very, very fast part of the blockchain industry overall. And global smart contracts are expected to hit about $300 million by the end of 2023. So the smart contracts market is a very small part, but it is also growing significantly. The investments landscape in blockchain, and this is blockchain overall, this is not ICOs, right? We're not talking about initial coin offerings here. This is equity positions that were taken by investors, whether those are VC funds or angel investors or corporations, accelerators, incubators, whoever. The funding for the last 3 years that we have the full data for, right, which is 2017, 2018, 2019, shows that you have a real big peak here in 2018. And then there was quite a fast drop in 2019. And people were wondering what had happened, right? There was sort of winter had come to the blockchain market, as it were, to the blockchain investment market. And most people agree that that actually basically just reflects sort of a sobering up. There was a lot of hype, especially in 2017 and 2018, a huge amount of hype. Bitcoin rose to an all-time high in terms of the token price. And that hype, when it didn't really pan out and people didn't see all the expected returns and expected gains that they thought they were going to, really led to sort of a crisis of conscience a little bit in the investment market in 2019. But obviously you can see that it did pick up a little bit in Q3 and Q4. And this is a significant amount of money as well, too. We're not talking about, you know, no money at all, but you did see a drop. And probably this is going to continue. When the data comes out for 2020, I imagine it'll be similar to 2019. And then you'll see even maybe a continuation of the slowdown, just because investors are understanding that there's a much longer period that they need to wait in order to see real product market fit and real return on their investments. So if we break it down by geography, the US is definitely the leader in terms of the investment, right? Again, this is just investment going in. So we're not talking about necessarily the number of companies per geographical area, but this is investment dollars going in. China's next, obviously, with 15%. The UK is at 8%, and this is mostly due to their very strong fintech sector. They're definitely a leader in fintech, and since a great deal of blockchain, a huge percent of blockchain still is concentrated in the fintech sector, that makes a lot of sense. Singapore, South Korea, and then other, right, the famous other. Now, it's interesting to note that Africa is actually picking up quite a bit in terms of blockchain utilization, so we're going to start to see a lot more investment going into Africa. Okay, Europe is definitely lagging behind in terms of investment. Again, this doesn't mean that blockchain activity or companies, small companies growing in Europe are lacking. It's just that the amount of investment that's going into them is less than in China or the US. So there's a few reasons for that. And one is that there's very few blockchain dedicated VC funds here, right? The EU just announced a new European-wide blockchain dedicated fund, but it's starting out at only 100 million euros, and that's not a lot of money. They're going to add to it, and it could get as high as 1.2 billion, but that's going to take place over time. That'll be a trajectory of increase. And there's a lot of sort of unwillingness or reluctance among general VC firms. If they don't feel that they know the technology well enough to judge whether the investment is going to be right or not, then they're probably going to pass on it. So you have a sort of a lack of capital available to invest in European blockchain startups. There's also the question of volatility, right? As we talked about, the price of Bitcoin is just kind of all over the map. And crypto is actually not a very widely used financial product yet. It is used a lot, but there has not been mass adoption the way that was expected in the beginning. And so cryptocurrency, there's kind of a struggle to really communicate to a wider audience what are the real world day-to-day use cases. Finally, there's something they call failure fatigue, right? Which is sort of a burnout amongst a lot of people who are building startups. As a lot of blockchain startups fail to raise money, there's been certain people who said, well, you know what? I'm sick of blockchain. I'm not doing it. We're going to look at developing alternative technologies. So there's kind of a backlash among some people in the startup community, which is sort of interesting. Down here, you can see this is just a graph that's talking about some of the biggest blockchain startups in Europe. And surprise, surprise, most of them are in crypto or fintech on a slightly larger scale. Okay, there are some initiatives, there are many, many initiatives, but I just thought I'd name 3 right here, or institutions that are actually helping to bring Europe up a little bit more. One is Bitfury, right? They're actually one of the bigger European unicorns. They're located in the Netherlands. They do mining, but they also, they have software and hardware infrastructure as well. They provide services, consulting services, including GovTech. They're consulting with the government of Georgia right now. And they have an investment arm too. So they actually are kind of putting their money where their mouth is to try and grow the industry more. Last year in France, there's a new incubator. Actually, it's a venture studio that was launched called The Garage. And their goal is to create up to 25 startups a year, blockchain startups. So that's going to definitely have a really big effect, I think, on growing the ecosystem. And finally, just to name, one of many programs, the EU has started Decode, right, which is based about building models and tools to take a data-centric approach to the digital economy, but really hard coding very, very strong citizen control protocols there, so that people can take a much more active role in the use and misuse of their data. Okay, as we said, it's definitely a nascent technology, blockchain, and smart contracts obviously is a part of that. And we can really see this from an investment standpoint by understanding that the majority of investments that are going in are at the seed level or the angel level even, right? So very, very low levels of money. We're talking between 100,000 and maybe €1 million. This huge concentration at that level means that there's a ton of very, very early stage startups that are getting funded, but not that many of them are actually moving up, or at least have not moved up yet, to need later rounds of funding. So you can see up in here, the sort of Series D, even Series C, Series D, those funding rounds are very, very small. Now that can also mean that A, there's not that many companies that have matured to that level yet. B, that several of them have, that many of the companies that are down in here are failing before they actually manage to get up in here. Or C, that they've sort of dropped down out of a fast growth model, and that they're waiting before they get any more funding to really try and perfect their product and get a better product market fit. Fintech and enterprise, I'm not going to go into this too much because fintech is a whole presentation on its own. But definitely within Europe, and overall, the top rounds in blockchain companies have gone to fintech companies. So that's really where blockchain has found its niche and sort of found its sweet spot for growth. And then it's a challenge now to see how it's going to move into other industries. Some of the growing pains, we've covered these, or the previous speakers have covered these yesterday and today. And I'll just kind of go through them real fast. Volatility, right? Cryptocurrency just bounces up and down. It's difficult to have a long range bet on stability there. Latency, right? The processing power is very slow of blockchain transactions versus regular ones. As an example, Ethereum can handle something like 15 per second transactions per second. per second, and Visa processes around 1,500, and that's that comes straight from Ethereum from their website. So they really understand that the processing power is a key issue for them. The speed needs to be increased. There's very big bottlenecks in many industries. We call them legacy industries, because there's so many players and stakeholders, right, including consumers with their own data, that have to agree to adopt this solution in order for it to actually work and be effective. So when you have an industry where there's many different players and many different intermediaries involved in one transaction, if all of them don't agree to participate with a blockchain solution, then you have adoption problems. And finally, there's the issue of energy usage, right? Bitcoin mining and crypto mining in general consumes a massive amount of energy, and it generates a huge amount of e-waste. So from a sustainability standpoint, crypto is actually a very, very unfriendly currency in some ways. Certain attempts to address these growing pains, Ethereum 2.0, right? It's, as Dimitri said yesterday, it's supposed to be out now, but they probably are going to roll it out sometime in the next few months, the initial features, and then keep rolling it out over the next 2 years. So they're claiming that by switching from a proof of work to a proof of stake model, that they're going to fix a lot of the issues regarding the speed, the energy, the opportunity. They're going to, obviously transactions will happen much faster. It will consume far less energy, and there's an opportunity. It'll sort of democratize it a lot more, because many more people will be able to participate in the generation process. Hyperledger Fabric 2.0 is coming out. That's going to be a much more robust product. And Cadena is a company that's finally managed to put together a really good combination of a public and private blockchain. And they've got smart contracts native there, of course, but they've created an open source smart contract language. It's called Pact. And theoretically, any lawyer with a good working knowledge of Excel can use it. So they can make it, it's sort of a tool that is able to be used by the real audience that needs it in order to take the technology further and make it much more widely acceptable and widely used. Because if any lawyer can sit down and write out a smart contract, then they're going to be much more likely to put it into practice and help their clients understand it. I'm not going to talk about smart contracts as a tool, because I think you guys have had quite a lot of that. I will just say that, to me, theoretically, they are a very simple and beautiful solution, right? The if this, then that kind of workflow is great. And business overall loves simple and elegant solutions. They're not always good at implementing them, but the theory of just a very clean set of commands to execute something, hopefully will become much more widespread. It is, however, really a paradigm shift, and it's something similar to what we're seeing in robotics, where you're talking about really fundamentally changing the nature of some kinds of work in certain industries. So it's not a surprise that there is a lot of resistance, both systemic resistance and internal resistance to implementing those kinds of changes. I wanted to bring up a quick example of one of the first sort of success stories of Ethereum and how smart contracts and the whole Ethereum premise could work, but also the kind of trouble that it could bring. Many of you may have heard of this already. This is the CryptoKitties story. In 2017, CryptoKitties launched on Ethereum. It was a game. It is a game, still running, and it basically proved that you can have a fully decentralized community where people are selling their assets, they're creating digital assets and they're selling them, and the entire thing is a use case for Ethereum on a consumer level, right? So it's not sort of something which is very abstract, the way, okay, I'm buying and selling Bitcoin, or a company is encoding assets on the blockchain. This was a really good example of a consumer adoption of the technology and the theory behind it. And it became so popular that a few months after it was launched, it actually was consuming 10% of the entire Ethereum processing power. And it sort of clogged the system up. And so all the other transactions, all the other Ethereum transactions were really slowed down there. So it's calmed down now, but it's a very interesting example of kind of the hype around blockchain, but also the proving context. Okay, I'll go into a couple of case studies here. I'm kind of rushing because I know we're gonna run out of time pretty quick. But I wanted to look at 3 different startups that are tackling the real estate market. Irakli brought up several use cases of land trust and transfers, and we'll go into that a little bit more. Just to kind of graphically illustrate it, the transaction process is called escrow when you move a house. And I'm talking about consumer real estate now. When you move a house from one owner to another. And that whole process obviously involves a lot of stakeholders, and most of those stakeholders have a monetary reason for being there. So over here, first of all, this is these graphics are done by Norban Labs, and they're in Sweden as well. There's a lot of real estate prop tech going on in Sweden right now. They actually built a DApp to simulate how the transfer process could benefit, and it's their prototype is quite advanced, and they can show how it really does work. This is kind of the picture of how things are today, where you've got all of these different stakeholders, right? The seller, the buyer, the realtor's in the middle. So your trusted intermediary here is the realtor. Hopefully he or she is trusted, but not always. If the house is, or if the home is part of an apartment building or a co-op in some way, there's going to be somebody from the co-op board involved. There's a housing inspector involved who has to come in and ensure that the house really is in the condition that they say it is, that there's no structural issues that could affect the value. And then of course you have the banks and various levels of negotiation that go on between all of these different intermediaries. So the transactional complexity here, not just a transaction of the money, but the transaction of the what's going to happen when is very unwieldy, shall we say. It's complicated, and at any point in this process, the negotiations could cause, or a break in the negotiations could cause, or new information that's discovered, let's say, could cause the deal to fall apart. So what Norban's prototype envisioned is that you replace the realtor, obviously, with a smart contract, and this is exactly what Irakli was talking about a few minutes ago. And you have the stakeholders all here interacting through the smart contract, right? Each person does their job, and as soon as that job is finished, the smart contract executes on that particular part of it, right? In the end, the transactional activity happens between the banks through the smart contract, and it goes much faster. Typically today, this process can take up to 30 days. And what happens is once the seller and buyer agree on a price and agree that all of these other things have happened will happen, then the buyer sends the money to the bank and puts it in what's called an escrow account. That money is held between these two until the entire process is satisfied. So until the housing inspector signs off on the conditions report, until the co-op board person says, yes, it's okay with all of our members that you sell the house, until the realtor does all the other things that they need to do. And there's a title search, right? Which happens to make sure that buyer Jane, sorry, it's seller sends his money to the bank, right? I mean, seller is here. Seller's not seller Jim, we'll call him Jim, right? And buyer Jane. Seller Jim doesn't have anything that he's hiding in terms of who really owns the house, and buyer Jane really has the money to pay for the house. So all of this complicated escrow process means that things can fall apart at any minute. And if it does fall apart, then of course the money doesn't leave the seller bank, or goes back into the seller bank. It doesn't leave the escrow account and never goes into the buyer bank. Obviously, we can take care of that all much more seamlessly with a smart contract. However, getting all of these people to agree to utilize a smart contract system, a blockchain-based smart contract system, is probably not going to happen anytime soon. So what Norman proposed is that you kind of realign the financial infrastructure piece by piece, and you start by having the seller banks and buyer banks agree on utilizing a smart contract to do the money transfer here. So you have the buyer and seller are still using their local currency to complete or to initiate and complete the transaction, but the banks that are involved actually go ahead and use a smart contract. And hopefully in the future that will lead to cutting out all of the middlemen and actually the smart contract being between the buyer and the seller only. All the other intermediaries are still involved, but it's automatically executed. The money goes from one place into another. The report is recorded and so forth. So there's a few startups that I wanted to talk about that are looking at individual parts of that escrow chain, let's say. One of them is called Proppy. They started in 2015. I think they're based in New York. And they use smart contracts to integrate instead of replacing all the parties. So they're not trying to get rid of anybody yet. They're trying instead to bring all these different stakeholders into a smart contract kind of paradigm and have the contract be executed there. But they haven't replaced any sort of real estate agent or anyone yet. The transactions are processed in US dollars and not in crypto yet. And they have a partnership with DocuSign, which a lot of people know from using to do other documents. And that will ensure a much more smooth adoption and a higher level of trust between the consumers and the company. They're also, and I thought this is really interesting, they're also really leveraging the kind of trend post-COVID, or since COVID, I should say, among Gen Z and millennials who are now all of a sudden really wanting to buy property. There was the opposite feeling before COVID. Many people, at least in Gen Z, were actually moving away from ownership in terms of cars and property and other things. But now with COVID, they've seen a big change in that. And so they understand that those people, for those of you who are in that generation, for you guys, you're used to doing things in a very different way, right? And this 30-day process of, oh my God, we've got to wait for this inspection to come, and we've got to have that report changed, and we've got to talk to this mortgage broker, and we've got to see this banker, and we've got to do all of these things, that is a very cumbersome and time-consuming and really frustrating process, right? Because people are used to doing things much faster and much cleaner, and typically in a digital way. So using Gen Z and millennials as the sort of target first adopters of this service is a really smart thing, because they're already much more able and willing to jump into a technological solution, whereas older people who are used to the kind of long, slow process may be a little bit less trustful or have doubts about utilizing something like a smart contract. So Proppy raised $15.5 million in their ICO. And they've had 3 additional rounds of funding, but they haven't disclosed who they were from or how much they were. The most recent one was just I think it was last week, actually, they just closed it, from Tim Draper. Tim Draper is probably, well, he's one of the world's most well-known venture capitalists. He has like 6 or 7 different venture capital funds. And he's all of a sudden very, very into blockchain. He started a new blockchain-based fund. He's very bullish on the technology. And so I'm sure that he's going to be making a lot more investments, both through his funds and himself in person, which is what this was. Meridio is the second one, or if we use the Greek pronunciation, it's Meridio. They were started in 2018 and not a Greek startup, unfortunately, although they may have Greek founders, although the names don't say that. But basically what they're doing is tokenizing real estate. So they created a platform where you can actually buy and sell pieces of individual properties. And obviously they use a smart contract, streamlines all the processes. People are making investments now. So if you want to buy 1/3000th of an apartment in Kensington in London, let's say, you can do that. If you want to buy, 1/3 of a farm in Iceland, you can do that. It's a way of investing in property without having to buy the entire asset. You just buy pieces of it. And in 2019, and this is kind of an interesting change, well, not a change, an interesting addition. They moved into the leasing market, right, instead of the securities market, because basically that's what the tokenizing of real estate is, or the investing market, let's say. They moved into the leasing market by offering co-working spaces the ability to sell their unused seats on Ethereum blockchain. And so the idea was that co-working spaces could put up a listing of any of their empty seats. And if you want to go and join a co-working space, you just go through the app really fast and sign up, and the smart contract executes all of the obligations that you have. You agree, you go take your hot seat at the co-working space. Now, I went in, I read a lot about that, and then I tried to find them, but they're saying, you know, the site comes up with a 503 error. It's not available. So I have a feeling that the crash and burn in the co-working market that COVID brought along probably took that product down for the time being, because there's no press articles, there's no news about it nowhere. It just doesn't come up. And it's possible that, you know, when co-working kind of works out its problems again, that they will bring it back out again. They actually came out of the Consensus blockchain incubator in New York. So, but they haven't disclosed any funding yet so far. But they have definitely gotten very good press about their product. Finally, this is a blockchain as a service company called Ubiquity, a great name. They are working in the title industry, enterprise and public records. So a lot of similar cases to what Irakli was talking about in India. What Ubiquity does is basically, first of all, they provide an enterprise-based solution, right, to allow people to search quickly what the issues are with the titles and deeds for land or houses, any kind of real estate. And they've got a product called Smart Escrow, which actually just pulls together all of the functions that we saw earlier in the graphic, and allows people to execute very, very quickly on the escrow process, especially around the issue of titles, because that's typically where, in the escrow process, that's typically where things fall apart. Either someone will have a conflicting claim on the property, perhaps there was an inheritance issue, you know, previous generations may not have solved it, all sorts of things can get in the way there. And so in order to get the clearance on the title, there has to be a great deal of records that are searched. And obviously, those records typically now have not yet been digitalized. In very few countries have they been fully digitalized. And so it takes a long time. And it's also really, really vulnerable to things like forgeries and so forth. So their product also handles forgery searches and issues, detection. There's room in the product for inputting information about repairs and improvements that have been done to the property. So you can really establish a whole long chain of the actual physical condition of the property, a digital chain of the physical condition and evolution of the property that really can much more fully reflect the value of the property, and also the title chain along the way. They also have been using it in the aircraft industry. This is something I didn't know, that the aircraft industry apparently is very sensitive to title on different aircraft. It's really important to establish the provenance of each different aircraft. And they're moving into the public records sector with two pilot cases. They've got one with the government of Brazil and one in Cambodia, where they're helping the government digitize title and land records. Okay, so those are different examples of what I call decentralized change. And I think it's kind of fitting because, you know, obviously the whole point of blockchain is decentralization. And so it makes sense to me that change is going to come in a very decentralized way, meaning that small incremental successes, let's say, or progress in different industries where there's a lot of relation with other adjacent industries are going to slowly build a web where you're moving blockchain further and further and further into mass use. And so I wanted to share a few more startups real fast that are actually accomplishing just that. The first one is related obviously to real estate, but it's mostly seen or mostly considered to be part of the legal industry. And that has to do with estate planning, right? So writing your will, setting up inheritance protocols, and generally figuring out what's going to happen to your assets once you pass. So two startups that are doing really interesting work here. One is called Clocker, and that's specifically related to digital assets. So if you have cryptocurrency, any kind of digital assets that you have, you can set up your will, your estate planning, how you're going to pass those on to people, and what are the conditions that exchange or that granting will take place under. Hair.io is another one that is actually aimed at consumers' physical assets, and it allows you to obviously do the same thing, you know, so write your will, do all of your estate planning. They actually have a very interesting add-on, let's say. I don't know if it's a completely essential part of their product or not, but they have a health tracker that people wear, which provides, first of all, provides proof of life or death, you know, when there's no longer life. But it also has a system of alerts set up that include weather alerts, disasters, any sort of natural or unnatural occurrence that might cause a life-threatening situation, and they alert the person to, you know, hopefully avoid that. So if we look at it from a sort of an overall business or industry standpoint, these are typically considered to be, you know, legal tech startups, right? But there's a lot of adjacent industries that they have a very, very direct tie-in to, including finance and banks, right? Government, obviously government records, the Social Security Office needs to know when you're dead, when you're alive, if there's, you know, new babies born and so forth. So people can change their wills, right? So let's say they suddenly have a new grandchild and they want to put that person into the will, so they can write a new smart contract that amends this one. Obviously the insurance industry and the medical industry as well. So there's using these kinds of startups will definitely help here, but it's also going to have a spillover effect in all of these different industries too. The more that these contracts involve different actors from different industries, the more we're going to see overlap and adoption. DRM, Irakli just talked about Sony. Rights Chain and Maker's Place are startups that are working more towards individual creators rather than Sony's, you know, big conglomerate with a gigantic library. But Rights Chain actually allows you to set up a copyright and track the use and the abuse, unfortunately, of your rights, of your copyrighted work. They're particularly focusing on written work, publications, ebooks, and so forth, but it can work for any kind of creative work as well. And Maker's Place also. Maker's Place is focused on giving you the ability to sell original artwork or limited editions of that. First of all, you establish ownership, you establish creatorship, ownership, and then you have a license to sell. And you can also really increase the value of your work by setting limited editions from the very beginning. So if you paint a painting, a digital painting, let's say, and you decide, okay, I'm going to sell the original and I'm going to have 10 limited editions of this digital work, and those are going to be sold as well, and that's it, no more, then any other copy of that appears is illegal. It's in copyright violation. Okay, so theoretically, these are, you know, obviously in creative arts and publishing industry, but again, they've got a lot of adjacent industries that they touch on to. Finance, again, obviously, insurance, right? People insure artwork. Social media, one of the biggest abusers of digital creative work is, you know, the minute you put it up on the internet, the minute it's going to get stolen or used by someone who wouldn't attribute it or give you credit for it. And obviously advertising. Finally, agriculture is a a good industry that is actually adopting blockchain much faster than one would think. Twiga in Kenya is a very interesting example. They actually connect producers and sellers of produce. And Breeder is working with dairy farmers in the UK. And both of these use smart contracts, and both of them are streamlining the supply chain management of food, but also really helping the producers get a better handle on how to maximize yield at the best time. They can help them with energy usage and weather conditions and so forth. So they're really providing a lot of extra services for the growers, for the initial producers of the product, and then follow-on services for the people who, the sellers or the intermediaries who buy those products. And again, they use a smart contract, so it all gets executed very quickly. So for agriculture, the follow-on industries are, things like supply chain, obviously, finance and banks, advertising, and telecom is a big one, because in Africa, many people, a huge number of people use a mobile payment service called M-Pesa. And well, there's several mobile payment services, but in this particular case, they're linked with M-Pesa. So once you get a telecom thing going in, then it sort of opens up a lot of new use cases there. So when you come across a company that seems to be doing something very specific with blockchain, it's interesting to think about how that can affect other industries, and how just the use of that one small solution is actually going to have a ripple effect or a spillover effect into other industries. I'm going to leave you with a quote. Mark Andreessen is another big venture capitalist. They have a huge presence in blockchain. They've just raised their second fund, which is putting their total money to a little over 800 million. If you want to learn more about software eating the world, you can start with some of these sites. They're great general news sites and research sites. And I'm going to go answer the phone for my son. So I thank you very much, and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you for that. So we have already two questions coming up from Nikos Tsoniotis. Sorry. The first one goes to George, I suppose, but everyone can have a go. It's the issue of trust in the gap of cyber to physical transition. Do we leave it just to an ethical ideal self-regulation society, or do we do otherwise in the examples that you mentioned, George?
I think that we can answer in a different aspect. Dimitris, can you help me? Because I think here we have the ethical and the technical aspect.
Yes, you can go one of the technical, of course, and maybe Iraklis can take the ethical or the other, of course.
Okay, Dimitris.
Well, sure, if you guys can hear me. Well, answering the question of Mr. Nikolaos Tsoniotis. So how do you handle the cyber to physical gap in terms of trust, especially with anonymity in place that pertains to ethical self-regulation? Well, first of all, in blockchains and of course in smart contract transactions, there's no anonymity, there's pseudonymity. There's a big difference between that. Yeah, your transactions are made through an address. That does not necessarily mean anything. It's just a specific set of hexadecimal numbers, but it is exactly your set of hexadecimal characters. So this transaction recorded forever can then be and of course spied on, I guess, or at least not recorded, but at least it can have some eyes on it. So in my head, as a programmer, in my mind, I'm thinking that the same capability for fraud that you see now through the opportunity to use cash instead of using an electronic system, that the same thing applies to economic systems that are based on blockchains or are based on contracts. Every digital system, whenever it works together with human elements, it's going to have some kind of capability for fraud happening. So the thing that helps us here, and I do believe that economic systems based on blockchain technologies are a bit more secure, come from the fact that transaction is recorded forever, and the address is of course totally unique. So by spying on this address, you can then, at future time, you can then sniff out the source of this fraudulent activity. It just leaves a permanent trail, which is the total opposite of what happens during a traditional cash transaction that leaves no trail whatsoever. So it not only addresses the problem that you mentioned, I do think that systems based on a blockchain are a bit more secure in the aspect that you mentioned. That's my 2 cents on the matter. We have of course researched this problem, and we have been tasked with answering it a ton of times in the past. And I think George also had something to say on the matter about the.
I have, but you don't have a good internet connection, probably.
Not the ethics, but systems.
Okay.
George, would you like to take this?
Sure. I think that since you've covered the technical aspect, I think that except the rapid enforcement and the fiscal differences that have been mentioned, through my perspective, that we must set the basic flow in order to proceed in this answer. Since the deployment of a smart contract onto the blockchain, the fiscal variable does not exist anymore. So we don't have the human, we do not have the physical error anymore. Smart contracts will automatically and cryptographically deliver secured transactions, which were designed to perform according to their design. From that point, we have an independent machine which contains an order that has been given in the past. Since it has the ability to perpetuate this given task in the future. Of course, there's a way to change this predefined order by setting a new one, by creating a new smart contract. I think now that the whole approach tends to be closer to the ethical part, as it was very wisely included in the question. The who to accuse scheme is the scheme that EU legal regulation bodies, for example, try to approach in order to control smart contracts in a democratized way. So I think that the answer to your question ends up being the read the code concept, because trust exists because everything is transparent. The large part of as we've seen, at least in my presentation, the large part of the profit that is being produced out of scams is related with the lack of knowledge of how to use, for example, an investing platform. We saw that phishing scams occurred due to lack of sensitive data, Ponzi schemes scams occurred due to financial fraud structures, and after all, social skills have been proved better and more efficient than coding skills in terms of tech-related frauds. And I think it's very suitable here to include a quote of the very well-known Harvard professor, Dr. Lawrence Lessig, who gained public attention during the foundation of Creative Commons. And he said that we can build or we can architect or code cyberspace to protect the values that we believe are fundamental. At the same time, we can build or architect or code cyberspace to allow those values to disappear. So it's up to us. It's up to us to create. It's up to us to prevent. And the ethical part, I think, was very to the point in order to approach the question and the answer at the same time. I think we've both covered at least a part of this question.
George, in minutes, I will unmute Nikos. Maybe it's more appropriate to have a real life discussion, or somewhere in the real life realm.
Sure. And Nikos, if you could explain what M transactions. on a technical level, maybe. And I hope my connection is stable, but because I keep getting messages that my internet connection is being unstable, I hope you guys can hear me. And
Maybe
girls,
you
of course.
switch off the camera, Dimitri. Dimitri, maybe you switch off the camera and then you will become stable.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Well, the question is something that we faced several times when we were dealing with any kind of provenance where you have data sourced from individuals. And although you can audit the source of data when you pseudo-anonymity, obviously, okay, it means that if you, at some point you have to audit. When we're talking about business networks, even anonymity is not an issue there. Logging is the issue there. Because in a business network, you cannot agree, you cannot how shall I put this? You cannot accept the fact that people are anonymous, pseudo-anonymous, okay, in your network, in a business network. When we're talking about public networks, however, at some point you have to audit, especially in the case that you mentioned with the fishery department in China, right?
Actually, it was water management in China, but yeah, the whole problem was regarding fisheries management, let's say.
Right. So basically, you're trying to approach a problem in terms of sustainability with local people that are not yet trained, but you have to enforce regulation upon them. So you expect them that they will report things ethically. That's my problem. In any kind of provenance mechanism where it's not a machine readable result sourced by an IoT device or something like that, then it's prone to misinterpretation or fraud or whatever. Not fraud, it's not exactly fraud, it's just wrong numbers, let's say, just to make it simple. So in that term, I would expect that some sort of custodianship or some sort of audit custodianship would be in place. Otherwise, how can you be sure that the numbers that are entering the system are correct?
This is, and I think Dimitris can answer too, but I can start that this is very connected to the hardware that you're going to use. This is much we've presented, that I presented in the presentation. It's the platform, and we've set the basic design of the flow of the data. In order to be sure that you have quality of data, you need to have specific hardware like sensors. And that still exists in the traditional systems in the fisheries, for example, that they use sensors, they use GPS systems to identify the location of its vessel, for example, if it's in a protected area or not. And it's not automatically, though, the collection of data, it's not automatically, they go and they observe. So you need to solve this problem too. And we propose, for example, this presentation, that it can happen in a transparent way, and in this anonymity way, that you can be sure that competitiveness in the market will be still active, and you will not give the data public to everybody, and you're not able to see every kind of transaction of its company. So you try to adapt hybrid conditions in this novel arena by setting this design. And Dimitris, if you can say more things about how we can be sure about the quality of the data, for example.
I totally get that, what you're saying. I'm thinking of it in market terms. Adriana presented some of the startups that are in the field, and the problem with a lot of them is that they cannot control the last mile. They cannot control the entry point of the data. If you cannot control that, the system is flawless, it's secure, it's cryptographic, it is everything acceptable. But if you cannot control the data sourcing point, then you're always prone to issues. It reduces them because you know where they come from. So if something goes horribly wrong, you know how to audit the whole chain and then go to someone and say, look, this is a problem. So it was just more of an ethical question rather than.
Well, it's also a process question too. I mean, you're very right. It's like, you know, technology is only as good as the information as what goes in, sort of garbage in, garbage out. But it's, you know, technology is only as good as A, the people who are using it, and B, the information that's fed into it. And so, I mean, I think this is something that it's the key to any sort of new emerging technology. There's a lot of bumps that on this road that are going to be, and some of them are going to be way bigger than bumps, you know, a lot of cracks in the road. And I think many of these, at least the startups, you know, it's different when you're doing sort of a research-based project, and you have both more room for error and less, in a sense. I think what the startups are doing is sort of proving the business case, but also proving the technology basis for the business case. And you know, you got to start somewhere, I guess, is their sort of the approach that they're taking. And so, whether or not, I mean, I think that, you know, the idea of tokenization of real estate, or fractional ownership, as you said, is a really interesting one. On the other hand, you know, there's a lot of both ethical and kind of business questions behind it too, in terms of, you know, what happens if you're talking about a landmark? What if there's any sort of you know, public use rights that are involved, that are infringed on, all of those sorts of things. And so with all of these cases, you know, and obviously there's regulatory issues too that are going to come along. And so I think that the only way to find out is by trying, is kind of where it goes out. And definitely really, you know, getting to the bottom of all these problems, and then saying, maybe, you know what, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it's not the right solution.
Yeah, no, that's,
well,
it's more, it's more philosophical approach rather than anything.
Well, it's a very complicated, it's like any sort of adoption of technology, it's super complicated.
To give you an example, the case with Myers that Yorgos has mentioned, I've talked with the people in IBM that developed the solution, some of them, I can't remember. I've also talked with Lawrence from the Brooklyn Microgrid. The case for Brooklyn Microgrid was that everything was controlled by technology. The case for Myers was a procedural problem. It didn't have to do with whether the data are correct or not. It's whether the procedure is optimized or not. So it's a balance between, you know, what's more important for the players at using the technology. But yeah, I get it. Sorry, I'm monopolizing the discussion.
No, we thank you for the.
It was an important question, so that's the thing. And if you wanna talk on a more technical level, if you will allow me to conclude this whole question, the thing is that, and Iraklis has also mentioned that in his own presentation, and Andriana has also mentioned it. If you've got junk data in, you've got junk data out. So you've got junk knowledge in the system. So it is all a question of how healthy the data coming in the system are, how sanitized the data coming in are. So the first solution to everything would be to just automate the process of data gathering through an IoT sensor or something that is not malicious, if I can say that. But if you have actual people entering data into the system and measuring data for the system and putting in the data in the system, then you're gonna have to deal with maliciousness, I guess, at some point. Well, another thing about blockchains trying to tackle that problem is that by creating an open system, and I want you to put emphasis on that, by creating an open system, you are allowing anyone to record or at least have some input on the system. So by making a massively accessible system, rather, you're allowing someone to, at some point in the future, make a correct measurement. So you have at least some chance of having healthy data in the system, and at further time, at a further chronological order, you can actually start to audit the data yourself. So yes, it is a huge problem, and I would much rather leave it all to machines, and data entry should be automated just so it's healthy enough. But if you want to take care of maliciousness, that's a much deeper problem. And open systems actually do care of that, take steps at better taking care of that. That's on the technical level.
As we can see, I think that
basically what you're referring.
The more we remove the human, the better we are in all the discussions.
At handling errors, exactly.
Yeah, at handling errors. Basically, what you're referring to is the social paradigm of when you have enough
Exactly.
people involved in a social network, then it kind of stabilizes in terms of truth. But yeah.
Yeah, but you can see though, I'm sorry to, maybe this is not the right time to bring this up, but I think that, you know, again, theoretically you can establish that sort of commonality and you know, basis of truth, let's say, but to the degree that it's dependent on technology, it's predictable and manageable. To the degree that it's dependent on human beings, and we see this now, and you know, you're subject to the cultural shifts which move within communities of human beings, and sometimes those cultural shifts can actually change behavior patterns, which can then influence other things. So I don't know that you know, fully moving completely to technology or completely to the opposite, the destruction of technology is the right way to go. But I mean, there's another issue, which in terms of sort of just with the provenance issues, especially with land, right, that I just wanted to bring up. And that is that in many places, I mean, here in Greece, you know, it's rampant. The land ownership issues are so complicated, and very few pieces of land really have full records associated with them. Or if they do, the records are, you know, often, shall we say, a little bit suspect. And so ownership is such a complicated situation. If you're talking about land that's been in families for a long time, or buildings or properties. If you're talking about new ownership of newly constructed properties, then it's a much cleaner situation, because there hasn't been either the history or the let's say, division that characterizes a lot of property. And so starting with newer properties and saying, we're going to implement a new system now that can handle this and move forward, and possibly digitize the stuff that's in the past, if we can and as we can, might be sort of a hybrid answer, where we say, okay, we're not going to try and deal so much with the things that are suspect, let's say, or you know, really ripe with errors, but we can start by implementing the system, test it out on the newer, less problematic errors, and then see.
So we can go to the next question by Nikos also. Adrian, you mentioned about the fractional ownership trend, which might be very liquid. I'm just guessing. Do you see a trend in the relationship between micro investments and blockchain technologies? Is there something in there?
I haven't seen much of a trend yet. I think it remains to be seen how successful these particular initial efforts are before people start jumping in on it. Typically, you know, the investors are going to want to see some kind of an adoption, and they're also going to want to see how this kind of a system can perform based on the, you know, given the volatility of crypto, right? So there's some dangers in this kind of fractional ownership of buildings, especially because the value of the property is you know, quite much more volatile than it would be based on a crypto system than it would be if it was just you know, sort of valued as itself based on the surrounding real estate market. So I think that as a trend, it's way too early to tell there. And as far as micro investments from an individual standpoint, if you really are excited about buying that kind of a share in property, then it could be something that's really attractive. So, you know, this Meridio, the guys they've bought a building in New York, and they've renovated and they've actually started selling pieces of it as the test case. So with the idea that they're going to roll this out to other properties, but it's also about having people list their own buildings. So their main aim is not to be the owner of properties that they then sell pieces of. It's rather to be the exchange platform where people can put up their properties and sell off small pieces of them or buy and so forth. So they're basically trying to be the intermediary. And again, I think it's too early to tell, but we can definitely keep an eye on it.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. I don't know, Nikos, if you have any follow-up questions on that perspective?
No, I was thinking more in the lines that ICOs were mostly succeeded or tend to be succeeded by STOs, which are more regulated aspects of ICOs. And one of the first application areas in that was real estate and is real estate at this point. But I guess it requires a very solid environment in terms of regulatory landscape in order to do something like that, unless you own it and then you sort of fractionally share the future profits of it, like in the sense of a building that you buy and then you lease and you just have fractional, which is basically cash flow logic.
Well, there's also, sorry, go ahead.
No,
there's all sorts of problematic areas within this use case, especially. I mean, you talk about gentrification issues, right? What happens when a property suddenly becomes an investment, not just for a single person, but for 15 people, right? And what happened, that property suddenly goes up in value, and oh wow, well, the house next door and the bungalow next to that one and next to that. I mean, this is very much an issue for cities. Obviously, it's not going to be so much one for urban areas, or I mean suburban areas or rural areas necessarily. And it doesn't. I don't think that they, particularly as this startup is. I don't think that they have any plans. At least I couldn't find evidence of this, to go into really, large land holdings and so forth, or commercial properties at all, which wouldn't make any sense. But for residential properties, you have a lot of really human-centered, if you will, ethical issues, which are very important. I mean, because if you're going to buy a building and then flip it for an investment as a fractional investment, right, fractional ownership scheme, especially on a token basis, then you're basically upending the very micro local real estate market within that little community. And that can have some pretty severe consequences for the people who live there. So, I mean, the side of me that sees it as an interesting business proposition, I like that. But the side of me that thinks about, well, yeah, but, maybe that's not going to be so great for the people around it, makes me kind of think twice about it too. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It was very revealing to sort of see. I kind of went a little bit further down into the blockchain real estate market and so forth, and really see how things have evolved over time and how people's attitudes are towards it. And I guess that's true of any time you're applying a new technology to different markets. So anyway, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms. The real estate market is a very convoluted matter, to be honest, and you're rightly so to point that out. But I was thinking more in terms of when we move into, let's say, autonomous vehicles, and we have fleets out there that are working like, let's say, taxis or car sharing or this kind of thing. You could be a business. I mean, you could fractionally own an autonomous car and send it out there to work as a taxi for the people that invest in it. This has less of a regulatory thing because it's not real estate and it doesn't depend on deeds and the history of it and so on and so forth. But the more certain things become autonomous in working, let's say robots, in I don't know how many years' time, if you can fractionally own the value it creates. So I'm thinking in terms of that more rather than real estate. Real estate is very, very interesting, but it's legally it's a mess.
Oh yeah, it's a huge mess for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, you can. I think what's the question there is, okay, but is blockchain, the right solution for that? do we have to, does this have to be a token-based ownership, or should it be just regular old ownership, joint ownership of public, of a private asset?
It depends how deep you want to go. I mean, George posed a very interesting, theme with smart contracts. I mean, if you fractionally own an autonomous car, then all the profits that are being created through credit cards or whatever are fractionally shared in a very trusted manner between the owners. So it depends how far you want to take that, from the top level of just the experience to the lower level of all the financial and yeah.
Sorry to
a lot of room for experimentation there.
Have this kind of sharing economy and sharing ownership, especially in Greece, in taxis. Taxis are sold for fractions. So you can have a taxi which is owned by 5 people or 10 people or whatever, and therefore they have all the plus and the negatives of ownership of that object, if I can call it that way, as it goes. So really, I don't see a problem as such. I'm not so sure. I understand your point of provenance, whether data is correct to start with. And I think, but that I think is completely, in my humble opinion, isolated and totally different to whether we apply blockchain or any kind of other technology. The provenance issue is there and it requires probably a different kind of solution. Maybe one solution may be, that you apply a social networks approach where a person, depending on the honesty, depending on how much they participate in the network, they have a certain gravity multiplier, which is a positive or a negative multiplier, or etc., etc., etc. But that is I don't see that as an issue per se, in my opinion, with whether we use the blockchain. I don't think that really adds to the problem or subtracts to the problem. It's a problem on its own entity, in my opinion. At least this is my understanding of the discussion that so far we have, I have been following here.
Yeah, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, blockchain is just another enabling technology. If it can...
Absolutely correct. Yes.
Basically, it's process automation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's more secure process automation than others. That's it. Whether it's the right technology for this kind of problem, I don't know. It remains to be seen, but you're right about that. There's so many things we can explore. Yeah.
I agree. Excellent. Thank you.
So I'll have to apologize. I have another meeting coming up. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Taking up your time. And
Thank you very much.
it was very interesting. Thank you.
I have also a question for Iraklis, and of course anyone can join. So Iraklis told us about the hypothetical opportunities in the personal sphere, that an individual becomes something like a data manager by herself or himself, which from my perspective assumes there is a liberal democracy established, perhaps an ideal or even a libertarian state. Do you think that our current political trend is going towards that direction? And of course, there is...
Okay, thank you. The answer, I think, is straightforward, yes. And I put this in another bold way because it was a few weeks back, that the VP of the European Commission, the Danish lady whose name now escapes me, who is responsible for competition within the EU, they're already promoting some legislation within the European Union that will force the big data collectors like Google, Amazon, and Facebook to share the data with smaller players in the market. So therefore, there is already a movement of that this data has to be popularized, if I can use that term. I mean, it has to be shared and not to be, I mean, at the moment, we know, for example, that Google, who has access to a lot of infrastructure, either implicitly or explicitly, and I say implicitly or explicitly, so for example, when you enable your smartphone and many of the Google apps, they're trying to, by default, get access of your location, And then this is the first thing that they're trying, and sometimes this is a must. And if you don't enable the location-based services, then they will not allow the functionality of this app to be deployed on your mobile phone or your mobile device in general. But even then, they go one step further and they want to enable the Wi-Fi as well, and therefore triangularize where you are and being able to pinpoint even within, because as you know, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are very, very fine in terms of location-based, other location-based services like GPS, and therefore, as a professor from Harvard is claiming at the moment, we live in the era of where we have the digital capitalism, as you call it. I think also to use another term which is much, much more offensive, if I can use the term, in order to wake up the people to the fact that at the moment, she used an example where a girl receives an email on her mobile phone where she's told, she's given the options to go and buy a pregnancy test because she woke up and somehow a camera took her face, and apparently when a woman becomes pregnant, the face changes immediately, and that is a denotion of pregnancy taking place. And at the same time, the person who owns that information is enabling an auction of that data, and is trying to sell to the people who sell pregnancy tests and the people who sell pregnancy clothes and all this attire around pregnancy, who is this person to whom they can sell targeted, but really well-targeted data, information and sales, etc., etc., etc. So if we are into that era, and therefore we can see how data is making money for this, then I can see how this person who actually generated the data, what is exactly the benefit out of it? I mean, what do they get back? And therefore, if we are to go into this harsh kind of activities where we have monetization in this way, then I think it's only fair, inverted commas, that some of that money goes back to the person who generated that data. So I don't know if you follow me, but this is really the rationale. Now, whether this is hard libertarian or fairness, that's another matter for discussion, I think. But you know, if you're contributing into making some fortune, then you should have some of it back to you. It's as simple as that. And because I strongly believe that I created the data when I walk up and down the supermarket aisle. Therefore, I don't see why this data should belong to this person who will sell it on my behalf to insurance companies, to a number of other players who I never meant to. I never meant to sell, whether I buy fatty stuff to insurance companies. This is something that I choose not to reveal. But this person is deducing that and is selling exactly all this added value. And in fact, I suffer from the specific activity.
So if you think that we're going to that digital capitalist, which is not the same with libertarian, of course, society.
Which is not the same with, like, sorry?
Libertarian society. Do you see a potential threat regarding the misuse of data and privacy from the state, or even you know, the private sector?
The state, unfortunately, is already here. The state has passed, in my humble opinion, unheard legislation, which is really not in line with the philosophy of the Western societies and the Western democracies. For example, forcing ISPs and telecommunicators to hold data for a number of years, by default to record all conversations. This is unheard of, but people are not really reacting to it, for better or for worse. And therefore, I mean, technologies like blockchain, in this particular case, could protect us as to exactly who has access to this kind of recordings and all this kind of data that is stored somewhere. At the moment, we know that telecom operator A, by default, has to record everything, and they have to store this for a number of years. I think it's up to 5 years. Okay. Now, who then has access to that? Potentially, any employee of that of that company has access to it, either because this person uses social skills in order to gain access through the person who are authorized, or is hacking, or is blackmailing the person who is actually controlling it, or a number of other reasons which really I cannot think, and I think it's irrelevant. So how do they guarantee to me that this kind of legislation, which forces them to act in a manner which is contrary to Western society values, is then secure and not abused? We know very well that all the data of the Greek citizens, which were held by the taxes until early 2000, were sold in Athens for 500 euros, because a number of stupid reasons during the taxes development. But this is a fact. And people had access to all the inland revenue data, of all Greek citizens who actually were making a tax application every year. Okay, so how exactly this happened? It happens because some people within the system, they abuse their positions. At least with such a system as blockchain, this is somehow recorded, because it is almost impossible to overcome and really evade the recording that this access has happened, and therefore it can be alerted. You can do a number of things potentially out of it, and really I can see no issues of threats to the citizens. On the contrary, I see it as a way where the citizens take back control, to use a Brexit, to paraphrase a Brexit slogan, take back control. Because at the moment the control belongs to the government, who is completely faceless, and to use a Thatcherite slogan, who is government? Yeah, who is government? Can you point out who is government? No, you cannot. In the same way that, according to Thatcher, you couldn't point who is Mr. Society, to whom she could send a bill.
And I have a last question for Adrian, and maybe we can conclude with that. From an economic and sociological perspective, maybe. So we're now in a COVID-19 crisis, with the real economy almost crashing, but the central banks are throwing trillions and trillions of dollars and euros, of course, into the market. And we also came out from the migration crisis in 2016, from Draghi's whatever it takes, and then we have the financial crisis on 2008. In all these situations, in the past 10 or so years, we had the central banks throwing trillions and trillions of dollars and euros to the market. But now, we don't see the risk-on investment attitude in the blockchain startups. Is it just a hype? Is it a market dysfunction issue? Is it a competition maybe with the large conglomerates, Google, Apple, and so forth, controlling the market? Is it a cultural issue? The time will heal everything, with the millennials coming up with the usage of such a solution. Why is there not, a huge investment taking place in the blockchain industry, from your perspective?
You mean from the consumer side or from the government side?
No, from the market side.
From the market side.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a very, crypto is a very volatile type of currency, I would say, and the market is even though it's been around for about 12 years now, it's still it's still clearly a very unproven and unpredictable currency exchange. And I think, basically Bitcoin, which, came out with such great fanfare and hype and was hyped for so long, has really sort of settled into the platinum of cryptocurrencies. It's something which is extremely valuable, but not really considered, effective as a monetary unit on a mass level or on a day-to-day basis, and at least it hasn't been accepted yet. And so until you get a really, really very wide-scale consumer adoption of the currency, meaning it's flowing around in the economy on a day-to-day basis, transferring goods and services here and there on a really, really mass scaled level, right? Crypto has yet to scale as a currency overall. And so until you actually get that kind of scaling, it's very hard for non-crypto based institutions to have enough confidence to start injecting lots more money into the market. I think that, the financial crisis in 2008, which, obviously, was felt extremely deeply here in Greece, several, starting then, but also several years later, we had all sorts of follow-on effects. But that financial crisis began with as a crisis in the real estate market. And so, sort of the idea that, blockchain might fix some of those issues points to maybe some areas for new market confidence to come along and see blockchain as a solution to problems that we've already lived through that were obviously related to the global financial markets and so forth. But I still feel like, there's not enough confidence overall because it hasn't been adopted. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem. And also, governments in terms of, central banks and so forth aren't going to put a lot of money into crypto, obviously, because they can't afford to take the risk. And because I think there's also security issues as well that central banks are not willing to take on.
Yes, of course.
I don't know. I mean, I think from a contracting standpoint, there's some interesting, and data as well. There's some very interesting angles to that question. So maybe, if Irakli and Yorgo and Dimitri want to take a crack at it too, go ahead. I mean, mine was sort of from a market/social standpoint, but there's technical aspects to that question also.
Sorry, forgot to unmute there. Are we talking about the question from Victor? Because I rejoined and I can't see the whole chat. So if you're talking about the question that is not visible after 6:22, could you paste it in the chat again so I can read it up?
I think it's better to go to Victor because we have a question from the audience. Victor, can you
thanks, George.
Can you unmute yourself and ask the question out loud? I mean, we can read it, of course, but
George pasted it in the chat. If he's
now I think it's visible now.
Maybe it's better for Victor to
sure.
say the question out loud and
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, I was asking whether this blockchain is superior in terms of technology. I mean, it's clear that it's consuming a lot of energy, the blockchain, and there can be seen some clear values, the fact that the data cannot be deleted and so on and so forth. But especially taking into account the fact that it's this aspect of energy and so on, what will be the real big difference? I mean, I was thinking maybe this asset transfer, that's the fact that it remains there, cannot be deleted and so on. That's a clear benefit. Otherwise, why would be preferred instead of another, let's say, public database using digital signatures? That was my question.
Thank you very much for repeating it for me. So I would like to talk about the energy aspect a little bit, and I will then pass on the answer related to the property markets to the experts here, to Iraklis and Andriana. But about the energy aspect of a blockchain, as you said, blockchains right now, and especially the Bitcoin blockchain, because I'm thinking that this is the example that you already have in your mind. Some years ago, it was news that the Bitcoin network was burning as much energy as the whole of Serbia itself, the country of Serbia as a whole. The difference here is that from a technical perspective, a blockchain does not consume a lot of energy. It does consume the world's excess energy. So because a blockchain is a variable system, the more people that mine, the harder the mining process gets. So the more energy it actually takes up. As this energy becomes more expensive for a local miner, he just shuts down his mining rig, his mining machines, and the network returns to normal by making this squeeze a little bit easier. So a blockchain does not necessarily burn up a lot of energy. It just it's the #1 way in the world to convert excess energy and cheap energy to money. So based on that, it is a very viable computational network that can be used for a lot of stuff. So it's all, however, dependent on use case. If your use case goes against having permanent records of something, then maybe it's not the best tool to use. Of course, as we said yesterday, it's not a panacea. It's not something that fixes everything. Smart contracts, blockchains, they don't fix anything. They're specialized tools, very specialized tools that are exactly good for what they do. They can do so fantastically well, as we said yesterday. So yes, of course, they're not completely going to replace other digital systems or other digital signature systems, but for specific use cases, which are quite of which there's quite a lot of, it is going to get better. Now, I would like to let Iraklis and Andriana talk specifically about safe property management, property transfers, but I would like to say I would wager that having a permanent trail and a permanent record of all property transactions made on a national level is quite useful to avoid fraud. But let's hear it from the experts, I would say.
Okay, if I can take my turn. I don't know if Adriana wants to go first, by all means. Now, for me, it is a clear case that this question is relevant and it is probably correct. When we're talking about cryptocurrencies, there the miners, as Dimitri said, really have to work quite hard and they have to work in full mode, etc., etc., etc. But all other applications don't really require the full blown version of blockchain implementation, as in the case of cryptocurrency. You don't have to have all this huge network of miners that perform this. You can go to private ledger solutions where things are much more simpler, and therefore this consumption of energy is not an issue any longer, in my opinion. Now, whether you, but suppose let's take the worst case scenario. Is it worth it? I would say, on a philosophical perspective, the answer is yes, because if you really live in a society where everything is digitized and really all the transactions happens automatically, and this is and autonomously to a certain extent, i.e. a number of various back operations that need to take place are taking place automatically. So, for example, as in the case when you provide, when you make a purchase from a website at the moment, there comes a point where you have to enter the data of your credit card in order for the transaction to be completed. Therefore, at this particular point, then the credit card is checked with a financial institution that you are banking with, and therefore they ensure that you have a valid credit card, and it fulfills all the criteria that this financial institution is placing upon. Now, imagine that you live in a much more seamless world where really you have your ID and you go in automatically, it collects your data, it collects your credit card. It knows which credit card it's supposed to use based on a number of criteria that you have set up, etc., etc., etc. Therefore, all this happens automatically. You just, express the wish that I want to purchase this item, and then everything else happens automatically. Then, in such a situation, we need to be we need to have really the whole flow of information and the whole enactment of various pieces of information as to how they came together and how each one initiated the process for the next piece of information. But also we need to be 100% sure that this person has actually, who claims to be this person, is actually done that, and therefore not a fraudulent case exists. So in that sense, I think that we require this expense, and this expense will of course be covered by the fact that we save electricity by performing this, because I delay performing this operation if I have to go and fetch my credit card, and then I wait for the one-time password to arrive. Then something happens and I leave it, and just about before the 5 minutes period expires, I type it in. So all this will happen automatically, and therefore, there will be some kind of compensation. But exactly, but at the end of the day, this has to happen on the field in order to be able to see whether actually there is more consumption of energy or not. But this. I mean, I don't know if Andrian wants to add anything to this point, or Dimitris wants to.
Well, I would say you have to. It's just to the question about whether it's a good solution for property transfer, as you said, Victor, especially in less regulated markets. I think we need to differentiate between a few things here. One is whether we're talking about utilizing this process for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of authenticity, for the sake of, let's say, trust. What is the real reason for implementing a blockchain solution to real estate transfer, right? Or property transfer. And then the other question is who needs to own the information of the transfer, right? Does it need to be given to the government? Does it need to stay a private transaction? So there's different ways to look at it. I don't know that it is the perfect solution for property transfer, blockchain. I think it definitely does solve many of the headaches or the pain points, let's say, of property transfer. On the other hand, you brought up an interesting point, which is, if we're concerned about blockchain applications, the sort of e-waste and energy consumption that blockchain generates, which obviously crypto is the largest part of that, but blockchain is going to, as it grows and is adopted more readily as a technology, it will have an energy signature there, I think. So to justify that, we're going to put it on a lot of different smaller networks rather than using a big public network that consumes a lot of energy. We can put it on lots of small. So we're decentralizing, as it were, the ownership of the information. Maybe not the ownership necessarily, but it's both ownership and location of the information. And so does that work for or against the goal of efficiency or trust or time saving? And so I guess the answer right now is, at least for me, it's too early to tell. I think in many cases, obviously, it can be a very good solution, but in less regulated markets, it's going to be a matter of trial and error to really come up with a final judgment that yes, it's a safe and good solution for property transfer. It's possible that there are other kinds of, maybe just plain distributed ledger applications that aren't necessarily crypto based. Maybe there are, simple old relational databases that can work just as well. And some of these startups that are sort of challenging the blockchain credo, let's say, are actually working on certain kinds of solutions that may address these exact problems too. So I think it's too early to tell, but I think it's a very intriguing topic to keep tabs on and keep looking at. I don't know if that added anything or not.
So we're almost out of time. I don't know if there are other questions that I missed. I think I think we have covered all of them.
I just wanted to, just as sort of an aside comment here, kind of following up with what Irakli said. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but the US government just filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google, and they're about to announce the terms of that lawsuit. So I think that, you know, it's whether or not it succeeds or whether or not it has any ultimate impact on their monopoly it remains to be seen. But definitely between the EU and hopefully the US government, there is going to be some changes made to Google's monopoly.
All right. If Victor does not have a follow-up question.
No, this was very, very useful. I'm also looking very, very interested in the cryptocurrency, but on the what is called the central bank digital currencies and the stable coins, where I think indeed that's a huge applicability of blockchain. Thank you very much.
Actually, just very, very quick, Victor, I'm really glad you brought that up, because Dimitri, one thing that might be, just to follow up with your comment and question about you know, given the sort of precarious and the ups and downs in the financial markets and the global crises that we've seen recently, why isn't there more moves into crypto? Stable coins and other kinds of currencies that are actually pegged to fiat currencies are one kind of middle ground where you might see central banks moving into making those kinds of investments and actually really, you know, pushing more money into those kinds of applications, as well as the market, because it's seen as more stable, and it's just something that people recognize a little bit more. It's not quite so far out there as Bitcoin for some people who are maybe taking an early step to crypto. So
yes.
Thanks for bringing that up, Victor.
On the other hand, you know, the central bank digital money can pose significant threats in monetary issues, in nationwide monetary issues.
Well, and hacking as well. I mean, I think there's, you know, just this past week or last week, I think there was a really, one of the big crypto exchanges in China, the OKEX exchange. One of their managers took off with the keys to 50 million in assets and they can't find him. So imagine if the European Central Bank had to suddenly announce that one of their managers, and I think it was last year or the year before, where another one that, I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was like over $1 billion in crypto assets just gone. So, you know, there is a value, I think, in fiat currency and paper, just like there's a value in paper records too. You know, I mean, one of the main threats or weaknesses of any kind of digital-based system is the fact that it's digital. And if all of a sudden the internet goes down, or we run out of power, or we can't somehow access those digital records, you know, suddenly those dusty old rooms piled with books and folders and things where records are written down don't look so bad anymore. So, you know, it's only as good as the backup that we have and the flexibility that we have in accessing our data and using it.
Yes, and also the circulation of physical cash is growing, along with the increasing digitalization of cash. So there is a potential issue there. So the central banks are very cautious to enter that space for national monetary reasons, apart from the security and all that stuff, as you said. So I want to conclude this workshop. I want to say a very warm thank you to the panelists, to the discussants, to Adrian, Iraklis, George, Dimitris, and of course the audience who was putting up with us all the time. Thank you very much, and I wish good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for organizing all this.
Thank you very much, and for the questions, of course, Nikos, we should mention him, I think, that left.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your questions, Victor.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
nice day.
Bye.